shame about our own achievements. Now the Islamist says it is payback. So every terrorist attack is payback. That's an Islamist. Here you have an Islamist. Oh, he's suddenly ashamed. You're a barking dog. Suddenly ashamed. It's payback to kill children. That's what he said. Who heard him say it? Put your hand up. 4 witnesses. And now the cowardly jihad has lost his confidence. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I want to start off today's conversation by asking a simple question.
What's the question, Bob?
How many Muslims do you think are Islamists?
That's a good question, Bob.
Now, the liberal media and the progressive establishment will tell you that the Islamist problem is the problem of a minority. A small minority of crazy individuals who do crazy things. And that is the line that our politicians, our journalists, and our social commentators try to spin. And at one level, I want to agree with them. It is a minority. But it is a minority of a stupendously large number. And as demonstration of that argument, I want to ask the following question.
Ask it, Bob.
If Islamists are a minority that is insignificant, then why do we have Islamist armies and Islamist networks operative and functional in the following countries? The Philippines has an Islamist army. China has an Islamist network. Afghanistan has an Islamist army. India has an Islamist network. France has an Islamist network. The UK has an Islamist network. Sweden has an Islamist network. Nigeria has an Islamist army. Somalia has an Islamist army. Sudan has an Islamist army. Egypt has an Islamist network. Lebanon has an Islamist army. Israel has an Islamist network. Palestine has an Islamist army. Greater Armenia has an Islamist army. Mozambique has an Islamist army. Syria has an Islamist army. Iraq has an Islamist network. Pakistan has an Islamist army. Islamist armies and networks operate around the world. And as anyone, and the Muslims laugh at this. They laughed at this. They laughed and smiled. Let's remember, these Islamists are bombing churches, kidnapping Christian children, raping women, and enslaving people. And a number of the Muslim audience laughed at the suggestion.
They laugh.
You see it on the news every day. And you are told, and he says, we laugh because it's funny that churches are being bombed, that women are being raped, that children are being kidnapped, that churches are being persecuted. And he thinks it is funny. No, ladies and gentlemen, as anyone knows, to marshal any frontline worker or fighter in any organisation needs more people supporting you from behind the lines than appear at the front of the lines. It's true for Christian missionaries, it's true for the British Army, it's true for the Islamists as well. As well as these Islamist armies and these Islamist networks, we also have Islamist governments in Iran, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, and Turkey. The uncomfortable truth that we all must accept is that there are tens of millions of Muslims who buy into and support the idea of Islamic supremacism. That is a fact that is indisputable from the evidence. Now, I agree it is still a minority. I am not saying it is the majority, but a minority of 1 billion people, if we assume that only 3% of that 1 billion support the Islamist ideology, still gives us upwards of 40 million jihadis.
Wow.
And those who support Islamic jihad.
How many? 40 what?
40 million.
Wow.
That is the size of a country. Our media and our establishment are lying to us because they are afraid. They are afraid to tell the truth because they are afraid of the social, political and economic consequences here in Western Europe if they do tell the truth. And so they lie. And the sheeple who believe everything spewed out by the BBC and the Guardian believe them unthinkingly and uncritically. Now, the liberal progressives have undergone their own experiment in colonialism. They have occupied Afghanistan for nearly 20 years, trying to colonize Afghanistan and to make them like us in Europe. And they have done that by following the same failed ideological principles that they have sought to use in the UK, which is that if you reform the institutions, the infrastructure, increase the economy, build schools, that suddenly you will take Afghanis from their world into a Western liberal world. And it has proven to be a catastrophic failure.
Big failure!
Wasting trillions of dollars, wasting tens of thousands of lives of Afghanis and allied forces as well. Why did they fail?
Why, Bob?
Because the progressives have bought into a Marxist ideology that believes that you can change human nature through the institutions that you put humans through. That is true to some degree, but it does not deal with the fundamental characteristic of human nature, which is that it is selfish and self-interested.
Right.
Previously, when Western powers colonized the Islamic world and Africa, they were not hung up in the same way that progressives were. They pushed their ideology onto the occupied peoples. And that is why, across the entirety of the world, people buy into the idea of the nation state. That isn't an Islamic idea. That is a Western European idea that comes from the French Revolution. The reality is that unless you tackle the ideas and the beliefs that give rise to Islamism, you will never be able to destroy Islamism.
That's right.
Islamist movements are a response to the success of the colonial period and the European powers. 1 second, sir. 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. Moderns and Islamists This brother says he is an Islamist. Right here.
Okay. He's an Islamist. Talk to me. Okay.
Simple proof, ladies and gentlemen, that I'm not lying.
Is that where the Muslims
So,
are raping women? Uyghurs,
modern
Rohingyas.
Islamists, moderns and Islamists,
Yeah,
moderns are seeking a compromise with Islamists. They think, progressives, that they can buy the Islamists off if they concede to some of their demands.
right now I can buy
This is a miscalculation of the highest order. The Islamists are motivated by a desire to dominate and to conquer,
dummy.
and they will not be bought off by any kind of compromise.
Nothing.
We cannot buy them off. We can only defeat them. And that is where the moderns fail. The greatest problem with conservatives, progressives, and classical liberals today is that they think that there is some kind of rapprochement to be gained with the Islamists and the Islamist network. Our government has already surrendered the Afghani people to the Islamist network, and the Taliban are no different to ISIS.
Nothing.
The difference between the Taliban and ISIS is the same as the difference between a Methodist and a Baptist. There is no difference except how they arrange the seats.
Come with the same scissors.
No,
Yeah.
conservatives, I'm speaking directly to you.
Alright.
You will lose this ideological struggle if you seek compromise. That is the problem with conservatives, is that they want some kind of fair playing field and some kind of compromise in which the Islamists can do their thing and the conservative non-Muslim can do theirs. And it will fail.
It will fail. It will fail.
Christians, I am speaking directly to you.
Alright.
Your biggest problem is that you think that every issue in the world can be resolved just by praying about it. You're wrong. You've never fed a hungry person by praying about it. You go and set up soup kitchens and food banks, and thus you demonstrate that it is actions as well as prayers. Now, I'm nearly finished and then I'll take your question, and same to you as well. What, therefore, can we do? There are four things that we must shed to defeat this Islamist movement.
There's that word again.
So let us look at it. Four things that people must do to defeat the Islamist movement. And Christians, I'm speaking particularly to you. The first of these things is to shed our ignorance. It is ignorance of the realities that we face that is defeating us. Ignorance of the socio-economic and political necessities that are needed as part of this struggle to win. Too many of us are distracted by beer and football and celebrity and talking about revival and talking about miracles to learn the things that we need to learn to defeat the Islamist network. In 2 Timothy 2:15 it says, "Be diligent to present yourself approved to God as a workman who does not need to be ashamed, accurately handling the word of truth." Truth is essential to this struggle. Speaking truth is essential to this struggle, and study and throwing off ignorance is essential to to winning this struggle. The next thing that we must do to defeat the Islamist network is to throw off shame. Shame about our own culture, shame about our own religion, shame about our own identity,
It's called payback.
shame about our own achievements. Now the Islamist says
Did you respect their
it is
religion? Did you
payback.
respect their language?
So every terrorist attack is payback.
We're here to pay
Every
back.
woman raped is payback. That's what he said. Yes, he said. There you go. An Islamist in London saying that raping and killing and blowing up churches is payback.
400 years,
That's what he's saying.
400 years you did it.
These are the people you are up against. Wake up!
Wake up.
These people are determined to win. You must also be determined to win. Now, in Galatians chapter 6, verse 14, it states this: "But may it never be that I would boast except in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, through which the world has been crucified to me, and I to the world." When you build your identity on Christ, the concerns of the world flee from your soul. And when those concerns flee from your soul, you find the emotional, intellectual, and psychological resources to defeat the Islamists like this. Because only when you lose your fear of death, only when you lose your fear of shame, when you lose your fear of being the outcast, will you be able to stand up to the Islamists and their progressive enablers, their liberal enablers. We Christians must be proud of the civilization that we have built and go confidently into this ideological struggle, believing that Christianity is the answer that the Islamic world needs,
One by one.
that the Western world
Why
needs.
is all the churches closed down?
No,
Why they're
the
all-
third thing
Why they all flooded?
that we must lose as Christians is our disunity. In John chapter 17, verses 21, "I do ask on behalf of these alone, but for those who believe in me through their word, that they may be one, even as you, Father, are in me, and I in you, that they also may be in us, so that the world might believe that you have sent me."
Converted anybody to Christianity?
Yes,
Ever?
yes, lots of people.
Tell me he's in hospital now.
So,
Mental one.
so, Christ teaches and prayed for the unity of the church. The unity of the church is paramount to victory against the Islamists.
It is by the
When Christians fight one another because of sectarianism or denominationalism or nationalism, when you struggle against one another,
There's another
like
Christian.
Russian Christians have fought Ukrainian Christians and abandoned Armenian Christians, you defeat yourself.
In 5 years.
It is only by unity that we can defeat the Islamists. Because in unity we can share resources, we can share knowledge, we can share strategies, we can mobilize ourselves. But that requires the unity of the church. And incidentally, that is why movements against Islamism fail. Because those who are standing against Islamists, like Douglas Murray, are just individuals against a mass that thinks like a people. we must also think like a people and not as a series of individuals. The final thing that we must lose to defeat the Islamists is fear itself. Philippians chapter 1 verse 28 to 30. In no way alarmed, be in no way alarmed by your opponents, which is a sign of destruction for them, but salvation for you, and that too from God. For to you it has been granted for Christ's sake not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for his sake, and experiencing the same conflict which you saw in me, and now here to be in me. Christians, we must lose our fear of the conflict against the Islamists and enter into it with the fullness of our faculties and our resources and our abilities, forgetting the failure of the Liberal government, forgetting the failure of the establishment. Lose your fear of the conflict with the Islamists and enter into it with the fullness of the skills, the resources and the abilities that you have. Now, Islamist, come here and let's debate.
Go on, go on. Step in the ring, Butch.
Come on, Butch.
Islamist.
Islamist, I'll save you extending your legs. I'll walk over to you. Right, go on. You had a problem. You said you were an Islamist. You said it was payback when churches were bombed and women were raped and children were killed. That's what you said. Who heard him say that? Put your hand up if you heard it. Two witnesses, three witnesses, three witnesses. This brother you see on camera, sorry, apologies. This brother you see on camera said it was payback when churches were bombed. It was payback when women were raped. It was payback when children were enslaved and killed. That's what he said. So go on, justify yourself.
You think you can keep your mouth shut for a
Gave
minute?
you space.
Just 1 minute.
The ad hoc attacks on the personality are pretty useless. Personality ad hoc attacks are trash. Go nowhere. Nothing. Pathetic. Help no one.
Try to hold it here when you speak. Sorry. So you can stop.
Make fun of his haircut some more. That's gonna go a long way.
Set it like that. Yeah.
Talk about raping my women. Yeah.
So how long do I have to wait for him to speak?
You finished?
We're waiting.
Oh, wait. You were interrupting me. Don't complain.
Interrupting you.
You're upset,
When
aren't you?
you
You want to
talk-
hit me, don't you?
Nah.
He's happy to see children raped, enslaved and churches bombed, but he doesn't want to hit me.
When you made that
I hope
idiotic,
his employers find this
you
video.
bark like a dog who can't stop.
Defend yourself, uncle.
I hope the police arrest you, by the way, for supporting terrorism. But I doubt that they will, because
Why?
the police are quite happy to let terrorist supporters like you walk free on our streets.
Who's actually terrorizing who?
Muslims, Islamists are terrorizing Christians
So-
in Nigeria, in Pakistan,
Pakistan?
in India, in Indonesia,
He's from Pakistan,
in
huh?
Malaysia.
He's from Pakistan,
Are you from Pakistan?
Why is that a problem?
No, it's not a problem. Are you from Pakistan?
Does it matter?
I'm asking you.
Maybe.
Maybe.
There was a blasphemy law against an 8-year-old.
An 8-year-old Hindu child.
Right. So you take one example.
Oh, not one.
One fucking
What about Aisha
example.
Bibi?
Yeah.
That's another
What
example.
about your types of people?
What about Solomon? That's another example.
your-
The Christians in Pakistan are treated like second-class citizens. Is that payback as well?
This is your petty argument.
Petty
Syria.
argument.
Syria.
All right. Well, it's
Can you stop
payback.
barking?
What's happening in Kashmir then?
Okay.
It's payback.
Forget Kashmir.
What's happening in Palestine?
What's
Must be
happening in
payback.
Syria? Who bombed Syria? Who bombed Lebanon? Who bombed...
Daesh. Daesh are bombing Syria and Iraq.
Really?
Daesh not bombing Syria and Iraq. Are they?
Are they?
I'm asking you.
No, I'm asking you.
Now notice the Islamists can't condemn any Islamist
What is your
terrorist
definition
network.
of Islamist?
Why, Bob?
You.
What mean what?
So here's my definition of an Islamist. This is an Islamist. You talk about churches getting bombed. You talk about children
You're a
being
parrot.
kidnapped.
You're a parrot.
You talk about people
You
being
are a
enslaved.
parrot.
What's he supposed
And his
not what I
response
said.
is, it's payback. That's an Islamist.
I said about.
Here you have an Islamist. Oh,
You're a
he's
barking
suddenly
dog.
ashamed.
You're a barking dog.
Suddenly ashamed. Suddenly ashamed.
You don't listen.
Brother,
Don't listen.
brother, I hope,
Don't call me a brother.
I hope,
Your
brother,
type of
I
brother.
hope,
I would put them
I,
down.
I hope that the police arrest you. I really do.
Offering non-violence. Why support violence?
I've never slapped anybody in my life. But that's your mentality. As long as you're a Muslim, you're a terrorist.
He thinks he's okay because he said it was okay to bomb churches, enslave people and rape people and kill children, and he said it was all payback, but he's okay because he's never slapped anyone in his life.
I said that. I said.
These are the people you have to fight. You have to fight them culturally. You have to fight them economically. You have to fight them politically. You have to fight them socially. You have to fight them in argument. You must crush them in every sphere that they exist in. You must crush them. Because that is the only way you're going to defeat Islamists like this who say it's payback to bomb churches. It's payback to enslave people. It's payback to rape people. It's payback to kill children. That's what he said. Who heard him say it? Put your hand up. 4 witnesses. 5 witnesses heard him say it. And now the cowardly jihad has lost his confidence.
He lost his confidence.
He suddenly is ashamed of what he said. Do you know why?
Why, Bob?
Because his conscience has suddenly been triggered because his religion didn't give him a conscience. Islam failed this brother because Muhammad desecrated other people's religious sites. That's why he thinks it's okay to desecrate other people's religious sites. Muhammad enslaved people. That's why he thinks it's okay to enslave people. Muhammad stole from other people, so he thinks it's okay to steal from other people. The Islamic empires, like the Ottoman Empire, tried to conquer Europe between 1299 and 1918. Every single year of that time, an Islamic army marched in Europe, killing, kidnapping, destroying, raping and pillaging Christian territories.
Every mass murder.
Every single one.
Are you all dumb here?
We literally just had
Have you never heard
an
of
Islamic guy murder 10 people in Colorado 2 months ago.
All the mass murder in history are non-Muslims.
Like Muhammad,
All of you. Read your history.
like Uthman.
All mass murderers in history.
And what did Muhammad do to the Jews in the Kaaba? He killed all the men and he enslaved all the women. And he raped one of those women himself. We Christians must rediscover that spirit that the Christians had in the medieval world. They were not ashamed to stand up to the Islamists. We must not be ashamed to stand up to the Islamists. Okay, he's got nothing to say. Nothing.
Thank you, Uncle. Thank you for helping us speak.
It's better than violence.
Upon random people that do anything. Islam, Uncle.
Support something from 20 layers deep.
If you're ashamed of your prophet's behavior, You need to find yourself a better prophet. And that better prophet is Jesus Christ. Christ is Lord. Christ is Lord. Das Volt. Das Volt. Das Volt. Christos Anesti. Christos Anesti. Okay. So, my next topic, ladies and gentlemen, is the silence that was met by the attack that happened here last week.